Page 3, 13 lines from the top of the page, Ve'ema Rosh Hashana Iyar. So we continue our discussion. We said that there are 4 different Rosh Hashana, and we explained that one of those Rosh Hashana, it's the beginning of Nisan, which is, in the biblical term, it's the first month of the year. So we want to examine that and to find sources why we said that it has to be Nisan and not Adar. What we said so far, we have the sources, book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, book of Deuteronomy, that tells us 2 important dates. They said that the 40 years when they left the desert, and they said it was a time that Aaron passed away, the first high priest, and it was the first day of month of Av, and the way that we count the years, so Av came before Shvat if you started for that time. So therefore, it has to be that way. So now the Gemara still challenged that. It said, "Ve'ema Rosh Hashana Iyar." Maybe the beginning of the new year, it's the following month, which means the first month is, which we call in Babylon language, Nisan. The second month, it's Iyar, which is, by the way, the month that we are now. The Pnei Yoshua said that there is a reason why we think so. Why? Because this upcoming Wednesday, as you know, is the Pesach Sheni, is the second Pesach. So Iyar has some connection to the idea of Pesach for those who miss the opportunity for all kind of reasons. Anyway, so the Gemara said, "Lo sageladach," you can't say it. Why? Because it said in Book of Shmot, Book of Exodus, chapter 40, "Vayi b'chodesh harishon," it was the first month, which is the month of Nisan, b'shana hasheni, the second year of leaving Egypt, be'echad lachodesh ukam mishkan, the first month, they build the tabernacle. Then he said in Book of Bamidbar, Book of Numbers, chapter 10, Vayi b'shana hasheni, meaning the second year when they left Egypt, b'chodesh hasheni, which is the month of Iyar, which now be'esrim lachodesh 20 of the month, which is, by the way, my daughter Ayala, our birthday. Right? So he said that the pillar went above the tabernacle. Since it occurred on the month of Nisan, and we call it second year, and when it's occurred in Iyar, we call it second year. So we derive from that, because the pasuk, the sentence in the Torah that speaks about building the tabernacle occurred on the month of Nisan, and he used the term second year meaning second year from Yetziat Mitzrayim, from Exodus. And then the other one that speaks about the pillar of cloud above the tabernacle was in the second month, which is Iyar. So therefore they call it the second year for actually Michlad Rosh Hashana Iyar. So you derive from that it can be Iyar. So the Gemara still challenged, we said Be'em Rosh Hashana Sivan. So let's go next month. So they said, "Lo sageladach dechtiv," because they said in the book of Shmot, chapter 19, "B'chodesh hashlishi," the third month, which is in Babylon month of Sivan, "Letzed bnei Yisrael mitzrayim ba'u midbar Sinai." When they left Egypt, they entered the Sinai desert. V'ita b'chodesh hashlishi shana sheni letzed bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim mi'ba'elei. So it means that at the time of Sivan, it begins of the second year of Egypt. So it can be, if you look at the order, the Torah put it, that's the word of Ritva. So the Gemara said, Ve'ima Tammuz. How about Tammuz? Ve'ima Av, Ve'ima Adar. So how about the other month of the, why? Because earlier Rashi said, we already proved that that's the beginning of Egypt, leaving Egypt. So that's the reason why they use this term, Tammuz Av Adar. Lama Rabbi Lazar, Mehacha, we learn in the book of Chronicles. They said, "Vayachel livnot b'chodesh hasheni." They said about King Solomon, the builder of the first Beit HaMikdash, that he built the first temple at the second month, which is month of Iyar, b'sheni b'shna arba lemalchuto, the fourth year of his reign. Mai sheni, what does that mean? Second, lav sheni la'yereach shemonim bo la'yerach shemonim bo lemalchuto, which means the time that they count for the king's reign. Which means that King Solomon started building his temple in the month of Iyar, which is the second month. And it's also the second month when you count the year of King's reign, which means that the month of Nisan is the beginning of count the King's throne. Matkif la Ravina ve'ima sheni b'chodesh. Maybe you say that this is the second day of the month of Iyar. So Gemara said, "Im ken sheni b'chodesh behedya avaktiv bei." So it's written Behedya or Ba'adei That's written there, which, like they said many times, the first of the month, באחד לחודש, בעשור לחודש, 10th of the month. ואימא בשני בשבת, maybe it's Monday. אחד לא אשכחן שני בשבת נכתיב. So one, you can say it's because you don't find any place in the Torah that use that what day of the week occurred. So you can't tell me that that's the exception. Another, ועוד מקיש שני בתרא לשני כמה. You compare the second one to the first. מה שני כמה חודש, אף שני בתרא חודש. They have to be in juxtaposition both the same month. תנא כבדי רבי יוחנן ששנים מונים למחים לניסן. How do you know that you don't count for the kings for the month of Nisan? שנאמר בסדר in Book of Kings chapter 6. ויהי ב-80 שנה ב-400 שנה לצאת בני ישראל במצרים. It was the 408 years when the children of Israel left Egypt. So what we said, that would derive the beginning of the year for kings. וכתיב, they said in Book of Numbers, chapter 33, ויעל אהרון הכהן להוראה על פי השם. The Aaron, the high priest, went top of mountain by the word of the Lord. וכתיב, ויהי ב-40 שנה ב-12 חודש, זה פרנתסיס פסוק, וכתיב אחרי הכותו לציחון, וישמע הכנעני, ויראו כל העדה כי גבה אהרון, ויקו בחודש הראשון בשנה השנית, ויהי בחודש שני, בשנה השני בחודש שני, ובחודש שלישי יצא מישראל מצרים, והחל לבנות. So you see all these psukim that the Rosh Hashanah for the kings start at the month of Nisan. So now we want to limit it. So just a word of introduction. It was from the time of the Babylon conquer by later on the Persian took over Babylon, and then you have the era of the Greek that took over from the Persian. That was the period that we believe the second temple will build. So you see the story in the book of Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, that was the reign of those kings. So it was 4 kings in Persia. You see Darius, the Madai, you have the Cyrus, the Persian, you have Achashverosh, and you have the Darius, not the Madai, but the Persian. So, and they use sometimes in Daniel the word Archashasta. It's a Aramaic name, Persian name, but the sages say that just the general name of Persian kings, like Pharaoh, the older king of Egypt is called Pharaoh. So what you see for all of that, it was the Madai, Darius, the Madai, he ruled over Babylon. That's the beginning of the Persian reign. Then you go the second part, which is the Cyrus, the Persian. He inherited, as they said in the book of Daniel, chapter 6, sentence 29. They said that the first year of his reign, the Cyrus announced that the Jews can go and build the Beit HaMikdash, and Zerubbabel goes there and start the building. And then it was all these enemies that inform and ask the king to abrogate his decision to build the Beit HaMikdash, etc. And they stop the work, etc. And then it was, according to Gemara in Megillah, page 11, it was all 4-year period of Darius and Cyrus. And then Achashverosh, what we read in the book of Esther, he took over the kingdom. And then the story of the 10 sons of Haman and all these evil people that they have a miracle of Purim, etc. And then we have the Darius, the son of Achashverosh, that was Persian, and that's the time that we have the prophecy of Haggai, Malachi, Zechariah, that start building the Beit HaMikdash even without permit from the Persian king. So when those enemies oppose that, and he checked in the papers to see in the chronicles if it's okay by his predecessor, by the Cyrus, and when he found that it was originated and approved, as they said in the book of Ezra, chapter 6, he approved it. So then, at the time of the king Darius, which is the 13th of Adar, the 6th year of the king Darius, then it was the first time of inauguration, and then the 14th of Nisan that year, it was the first time they built in Beit HaMikdash, the second one, the Paschal Lamb, since the destruction. That's in the book of Ezra, chapter 6, sentence 19. Then you see the story how Ezra, the scribe, came to Jerusalem with a group of people in the month of Av, in the 7 years of the king reign, and he bring the king bring a letter from the king that give him an approval to be in charge of what's going on. And then you read the story how Nehemiah, the administrator, followed him, and he asked to go there and help, etc. So you see this process of how things turn in a certain way. But the book to read more about it is the Rav Sadia Gaon Emunot V'Deot, chapter 8, and also you read it in Maharal, Be'er HaGolah, also a special section for that. Anyway, says all this discussion that we count for the king, beginning of the throne, applies to the time of month of Nisan, meaning the first month, biblically speaking. That's the way you count Jewish king. But when it's come to honor non-Jewish king, you counted by the first of Tishrei, the way that you count, generally speaking, the years. Shenemar, because it said in the book of Nehemiah, the first chapter, so it means that when he used that term, the 20th year, because this month of Kislev, we call it 20 years, and then you have Nisan, you have, and again 20 years, so you see Nisan is following Tishrei. So if it's following Tishrei, it means that you count the non-Jewish king from the month of Tishrei. You see here that they count the non-Jewish king from a different way. So at Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, from the counting the non-Jewish king, it's not in Nisan. So the Gemara challenges, that applied to that kingdom that was in 20 years. How do you know that for the 20 years that we mentioned, Dilma, maybe it follows some other count, which means maybe the 20 years that we mentioned here, it's applied, it's the Tosfot said, to a different way. You derive a very clear verbal analogy from this word of 20 years. Ma'atam artach shasta afacha artach shasta. The same applied to the king reign. How do you know that Kislev precedes Nisan? He talked about the bad poverty and the whole situation of the Jews in Yerushalayim. Nehemiah said it to the king in the month of Nisan. So that means that the second event, the first event mentioned in the first line precedes the second event in the second line. הדברים שאמר חנני לחמיה בכסלו, שנאמר, they said, the beginning of book נחמיה, דברי נחמיה בן חכליה ואי בחודש כסלו 12 בנית, בשנה בירה, I was in the Shushan, the capital, ויבוא חנני אחד מהחייבו, ואנשים יהודה ושלם על היהודים הפליטה, אשר נשארו מן השבי, because it was a lot of looting, a lot of the enemies, they did harm to us. You read the whole story of before the Shoah, happened the same. They just came in, started looting the Jewish stores and going after Jewish properties. ועל ירושלים אמרו לי, הנשארים אשר נשארו מן השבי שם במדינה, ברעה גדולה בחרפה. The people who was there, they suffered tremendous persecution. בחומת ירושלים מפורצת ושרן שתו בעץ. He described what's going on. He says that the wall of Yerushalayim, it's breached, and he says that the gates was burned in a fire, with fire. So you see here that only the Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt, not the city. That's a common mistake. It was two different things. So because Nehemiah talked to the king, well, it was in the month of Nisan. We derive from that, so Nehemiah brought for him yain lefanav. He brought the wine before the king. I lift up the wine and gave it to the king. So it means always I show a nice face, a happy face, but at this moment I couldn't control myself. I was in a tremendous sorrow, Nehemiah said, because I heard what's going on in Yerushalayim, the poverty and the persecution, and the king noticed, that's the Marsha said, noticed that I'm very upset. So he said, why you show me such an anger face? you're not sick. Maybe you have some poison put in my drink or something like that. I was afraid that the king suspected me for something bad. I wish king to live forever. I am very hurt to hear that the city of my ancestors, Yerushalayim, it's destroyed and the gates is burned in fire. So he says to me, what are you asking for? So he said, pray before the Lord of heaven. So first means that he first prayed to Hashem. If I find favor before your eyes, please give me a permission to be your emissary, go to cities of my ancestors and I want to rebuild it. Which means he's made. He says, okay, I'll let you do it, but how long are you going to go? And how long shall your journey be? So it was good, please before the king, he sent me, and I sent him time, which means I gave him a time limit, how long I'm going to be away to do that mission. So it means, after he heard this word from Hanani, it was the month of Kislev that precede to that statement. So now we challenge again. Rav Chisda said at the beginning of the non-Jewish king, it started the Tishrei, Mativ Rav Yosef. He said in the book of Chagai, the first chapter, Bashishi, it happened 24th day of the month of Elul, Bishnat Shtayim Daryavesh, the second year of the Deres. So now they're beginning to do work for the Beit HaMikdash. Uchtiv, and it's read in the following pasuk, Bashvi'i, 7 months is the month of Tishrei, Bishnat Shtayim Be'esrim V'echad Lachodesh, Hayad V'Hashem B'yad Chagai Navi. So you see here a different time. If you tell me that the third year, which means the 7th month, which is the month of Tishrei, which is the 3rd year of the Deres, that's the beginning of the time of Tishrei, that they start the 3rd year from those years of the reign. Omar Rabbi Abahu, Koresh Melech Kasher Haya. So Rashi here explain, using Klomar, and I explained it in my book, what does that mean? Koresh Melech Kasher Haya, Klomar, Hashem Shaya Kasher Karu Koresh. So he said, the truth is, Rashi have a challenge, but the word Koresh maybe is the Derish, it appears to be more Derish. So he said the Koresh meaning, it's expression of, it's like kasher, it's like he was good. So it means they appointed him as one of the quote-unquote Jewish kings because he was exceptionally kosher, meaning was good. And the Pnei Yoshua brought it a little different. Anyway, so he said, so here is an exception, that's the reason why they make him as one of the Jewish kings. You see in the Tosfot, in the next page, he elaborates on that. Anyway, so they said, Matkif la Rav Yosef Chada, Im Ken Kashu Ka'adate. Now you see contradiction between two Pesukim. They said in the book of Ezra, chapter 6, Veshetzei Baita, Denad Yom Tlat Aliyah Chadar, Di'ish Nat Shetem Malchut Daryavesh Malka. That's the time that the Beit HaMikdash completed, which means up to the third of the month of Adar, the 6 years, when Darius was in charge. V'tanya Avot Hazman Shana Balaz Ram Velo Galuto Imo. That year Ezra came from Babylon with his exile, which means that he didn't come close to the time of Nisan, of building the Beit HaMikdash, but the following year, that's the way we understand for the Gemara, that was for the little avenue. They said when Ezra came to Yerushalayim, he came to Jerusalem at the 5th month, which is the month of Av, the 7th year of their king year, which means Ezra entered Yerushalayim about a year and a half after the completion of Beit HaMikdash. If Rav Chisda word is correct, that it happens in the 8 years of Deres, and we counted from the month of Nisan, Shana Shminit Mibailei. You need to use the 8 years of the Deres, which is the year after the Adar of the king. So he said, Ve'od Midame, how do you compare the two? They are saying that the Cyrus was a kosher king. How this is connected to the whole statement of Chagai in regards to building Beit HaMikdash. So they said, Hatam Koresh, Hachad Der Yavesh. Over there it's Koresh, and over there it's the Yavesh. It's two different things. This is Cyrus's and this is Darius. So he said, Tana, hu Koresh, hu der Yavesh, the same one. Hu Artach Shasta, that's the same king. And Koresh, shemelech kasher haya. Because he was a special king, it's Koresh was a virtuous, kosher, kasher king. Kaf Shin Reish. Artach Shasta al Shem Malchuto. That's the acronym for all the kings in Babylon. The same Rashi said in the book of Ezra, chapter 6, sentence 14, that's the same as the Pharaoh for Egypt. Uma Shmo, what is the real name? The real name is the Yavet Shmo. His real name, he was a Darius. So that's his name, and you see several sources for the book of Ezra, chapter 6. And therefore, when he said that he's the kosher king, it means that there is the Persian, and that's the way they mentioned in the book of Haggai. So now, Mikol Makom Kashya, because earlier we said what? That's not count the year of Darius, we counted from Nisan. Yitzchak lo Kashya, kan kodem sheichmitz, kan achar sheichmitz. That was before he is messed up. He did all kind of corrupt, and the other one is after he corrupted, which means after Ezra went there, ascended, Darius changed his name, became wicked, and now since he's wicked, so they count him like all the other kings with Tishrei, and not from Nisan.
לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי